Hello and welcome to the course. Cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and it is expected to hit $250 billion in the near future. With hundreds of thousands of highly paid jobs available all around the world, it is a smart decision to invest your time and efforts into obtaining the Certified Information Systems Security Professional certification. Hi, my name is Usman. I have a PhD in computer networks. I have more than 10 years of experience in the cybersecurity industry. I've also been involved in teaching and delivering keynote speeches all around the world. And obviously, I am CISSP certified. Let's see what the course offers. We are first going to discuss the CISSP exam structure and the 8 domains that are covered under the common body of knowledge. We are also going to have a discussion on how computerized adaptive testing works in the CISSP exam and how you can familiarize yourself with the exam. We're also going to discuss the experience requirements which are mandatory to meet if you want to be CISSP certified. Finally, we're also going to discuss some preparation and test taking tips which is going to help you streamline your preparation and exam process. Let's discuss the CISSP exam structure. So it's basically a 3 hours exam. Previously, it used to be a 6-hour exam, but now it's 3 hours. You'll get somewhere between 100 to 150 questions. So the exam can stop anywhere from 100 to 150, whether you have hit the threshold of passing the exam or if the engine has determined that your score is way too low. Question format is typically multiple choice, but you will see a few drag and drop and other types of questions as well. But primarily you'll be going to be dealing with multiple choice exams. The pass grade is roughly 70%. You need to pass all 8 domains of the CISSP exam. The language of the exam is English, and the syllabus are 8 domains included in the common body of knowledge. Let's discuss the CISSP domains. The CISSP exam expects candidates to be well versed in 8 different domains. So the first domain is security and risk management, the largest domain of the CISSP exam. It includes concepts like confidentiality, integrity, and availability, compliance requirements. You should be familiar with what are policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines. Risk management also forms a large part of this domain. The second domain is asset security. This is the smallest domain and also holds a bit less weightage. It includes things like identifying and classifying information and assets, data security controls, how you should handle your assets. So for example, if you are decommissioning your media, once it has been used for storing sensitive information, how do you sanitize it? Things like that. So the third domain is security architecture and engineering. You should be familiar with security models such as BIBA, Bell LaPadula, and so on. You should be able to assess and mitigate vulnerabilities in web-based systems, mobile systems, and embedded systems. Cryptography forms a major part of this domain, and you should be aware of all the different types of cryptographic schemes, including public key cryptography, private key cryptography, and so on. The fourth domain is communication and network security. It is also a pretty large domain, and you're supposed to be familiar with the protocol stacks such as OSI and TCP/IP. You should know different protocols related to security. So for example, you should be familiar with IPsec, TLS, and then you should also be familiar with solutions such as VPNs and so on. The fifth domain is identity and access management. You should be able to control physical and logical access to assets. IAAA is perhaps the cornerstone for this domain, which stands for identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. So the sixth domain is concerned with security assessment and testing. You should be familiar on how to test security controls. You should be familiar with vulnerability assessment, penetration testing techniques, code reviews, and security audits, and so on. The seventh domain is security operations, and this includes incident response, disaster recovery, forensics, logging and monitoring, and should also be familiar with foundational security operations concepts such as job rotation, principle of least privilege, and so on. The last domain is software development security, and in this domain, you should be able to understand and integrate security in the software development lifecycle. You should be familiar with secure coding guidelines and security of software environments and so on. Now this was a brief overview of the 8 different domains. Let's have a more detailed look at each of these 8 domains. So the first domain is security and risk management, perhaps the largest domain of the CISSP exam. It includes things like the CIA triad, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, security governance, security control frameworks, organizational roles, policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines, regulatory compliance, ISC Square Code of Professional Ethics and their canons, which you must abide by, business continuity requirements, personnel security policies and procedures, threat modeling frameworks, and risk management. The second domain of the exam is asset security. You should be able to identify and classify information and assets. You should be familiar with concepts like who are data owners, data custodians, data controllers, data processors, and so on. Data privacy protection, data security controls, data retention policies, asset handling requirements. So for example, you should be familiar with if you've used a media to store sensitive data, how do you decommission it and how do you sanitize it, things like that. The third domain is security architecture and engineering. Now this includes engineering processes using secure design principle, security models, security controls, vulnerabilities of security architectures, designs, and solutions. A large part of this domain comprises of cryptographic concepts. So you will be looking at private key cryptography, public key cryptography, and their associated solutions. Secure site and facility design, site and facility security controls. The fourth domain is communication and network security. It is also a very large domain. It includes a lot of different concepts. So you'll be looking at secure network architectures, including protocol stacks such as OSI and TCP/IP, software-defined networks, wireless networks, secure network components, security controls based on requirements, and secure communications and their associated protocols and solutions. The fifth domain is identity and access management, also called IAM. Now this includes things like securing physical and logical access to assets, identification and authentication of people, devices, and services, identity as a service, authorization mechanisms such as discretionary access control, mandatory access control, and so on. It also includes attacks on access controls such as dictionary attacks, brute force attacks, and so on. You're also going to see identity and access provisioning lifecycle. The sixth domain is security assessment and testing. And this includes discussion of assessment, test, and audit strategies, security control testing, analysis of test outputs, and facility security audits. Domain 7, the second last domain, is security operations. This includes things like security investigations. You should be familiar with how to collect evidence, how to preserve its sanctity, digital forensics, logging and monitoring, secure provisioning of resources, and many important concepts such as need to know, least privilege, job rotation, and so on. Incident management is also a big part of this domain, and you should be familiar with measures for detection and prevention of security incidents, vulnerability management, patch management, and disaster recovery processes and plans. The last domain is software development security, and you should be familiar with concepts related to integrating security in the software development lifecycle, security controls in development environments, software security, secure coding guidelines, and standards. Next, let's have a look at the weight assigned to each of these domains. So security and risk management is 15%, the largest share of the exam. Asset security has the smallest, which is 10%. Security architecture and engineering 13, communication network security 14, identity and access management 13, and so on. The basic point that I want to emphasize here is that even though you're seeing small differences in the weightage assigned to respective domains, however, in order to clear the exam, you have to know each and every domain and you have to clear all 8 of them. Even if a domain has slightly less weightage, it is still equally important as all other domains because you need to be able to clear that domain as well in order to get your certification.